Welcome to the Socially Awkwards Podcast, episode number 2. I am Matticus Finch, and sitting with me here today, as always, is
Brandon J. Mikowski.
excellent. I love that middle initial. Today, we are going to be discussing anxiety. And I think that this is going to be a good one for people because we are going to discuss our own personal experiences with anxiety, how it affects our lives, how it affects our mental state, how it affects our sleep, how it affects our relationships. And I think I think a lot of people will be able to relate to this, and I think it'll be great. But before that, Brandon, we have a special segment for everybody today, and this special segment is called Blow Your Mind. In no sexual way whatsoever. It's just completely trying to blow our minds with a crazy, interesting fact that hopefully the other person has never heard before. So, Brandon, with that, I will let you go first, and I will let you try to blow my mind.
Okay, so according to a 2010 study, and we can dive into the methodology if you want, but according to the study, they found that people's minds, your mind wandered, on average, 46.9% of your waking life.
What was that? Oh, no, I'm just kidding. 46 point what?
46.9, which is very
40.
important.
That's the point. Mind's important. Nearly 50% of the time, your mind wanders. I guess I understand what they say by wander, but that's kind of subjective, right? Like, are they saying, because remember the old adage that like men think about sex like every so many seconds or whatever, and that's,
like 7 seconds.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I don't do that. I think that's like not really. I think if somebody is thinking about sex every 7 seconds, I think it's probably some kind of mental health disease that they probably need to get checked out. But
Is that what it?
That is that is blowing my mind, though, that 50% people wander. I just read something a couple days ago that said that our average attention span now is down to 7 seconds. And I was like,
that
what?
checks out.
7 seconds? And then I completely went to something else after a few seconds of reading that.
The next TikTok video probably after that one was...
it was great. Are you looking up the sex fact with how many times men think about sex?
No, but I did have a piece of information to tag on to what I just said that I think goes along with the episode, and what we're talking about today. But it's that they found that wandering minds is related to lower levels of happiness, and can also possibly increase levels of anxiety. But the main thing is just lower happiness. So nearly half the time of your waking life, your mind is doing a thing that leads to lower happiness.
Yeah, and that's, on top of everything else, that would also give you depression or anxiety or whatever. That's interesting. Yeah, I could totally see that as my mind wanders to something else right now. But I could totally see that. Yeah, look at that ceiling, man. Count those tiles.
It's not the ceiling, actually. It's still the wall,
Okay, my bad.
Yeah.
Camera's on a little bit of an angle, I think, so it just looks like, well, up there's the ceiling. I know you can't see where I'm.
Yeah, you can't. I have it pointed out because the carpet it's a
does
reveal.
Not match the drapes.
Well, it's a mid-season reveal hook. So I'm gonna keep people guessing about it.
That's actually great. I like those. We could have I like those kind of things.
Yeah.
So your mind wanders nearly 50% of your time, your whole entire life. Yeah, and this is probably, I would assume that this is even more if you're ADD or something. Or maybe that's just part of it. But I've always thought that most people do have ADD. It's just some people just don't have it that bad. And I feel like everybody loses focus. So, yeah. All right. Well, my mind is still here. So you didn't blow it, which is probably good because we couldn't do the rest of the podcast if that happened. Mine is a little bit more of a geographical. Is that a word? Geographical?
Yeah, it's a word. I think it's...
Oh, geographical. Yeah, sorry.
Dictionary.
I'm saying it weird. It's geographical fact. Okay, so from 1777 to 1791, the state of Vermont was an independent country. This was 14 years. They did not want to join the American Revolution, but they did not want to be part of England either. In 1777, they declared their independence and they adopted their own constitution, and they initially called themselves New Connecticut before settling on the state of Vermont. And they established a government, including a council of safety and elected officials, and operated its own postal service along with its own currency. So for 14 years, Vermont was technically a country and just an interesting factoid. And now what are they? Pretty insignificant. Sorry, Vermont, you're not very big. You're by New
Sure,
York.
yeah.
So I don't know
New
if that.
Connecticut. Now, that's an original name, right? I wonder how what, put that.
Yeah, I believe that New Connecticut was a way. I think what they did is they asked New Jersey and New York, and they were just like, "Hey, how'd you guys come up with your name?" And that's what they did. And then apparently they really enjoyed Connecticut. I'm not really sure why, but all right. Well, that was my blow your mind fact. So
Now,
let's.
what's Vermont? Isn't Vermont known for, what is it, maple syrup or something like that?
I think
Vermont maple
yeah.
syrup, is that
I
right?
think they're known for that. They're also known for they have a fun fact about Vermont is they have one of those assisted suicide. It's legal in that state. And it's also legal, I think, in Oregon or maybe just Portland. But in Vermont, in Oregon, you have to be a resident of Oregon to actually do it. But in Vermont, you can actually drive there. If you are not a resident of Vermont, you can get assisted suicide. So Jack Kevorkian fans rejoice, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
But that could be a whole different subject at another date, at a later date. So let's talk about anxiety. And I think that, well, first of all, I just want to discuss a little bit of the anxiety that I feel like that I felt before doing this podcast. I told you before that it took like a couple of years for me to even do this. There was people that I had kind of on the line hooked in, but then it didn't really work out. And then finally I was able to do it with you. But even when that happened, when we talked about it, I was quite anxious. I was quite anxious today to get the episode to. It was like 3 o'clock, and I'm just like, man, maybe we should just start now. But I was like, it's one of those things where I think your brain wants to get things over with. And I don't know if that's a healthy thing for your brain to have. But I want to just kind of get your overall thoughts on anxiety before we kind of jump in to some actual detailed points.
Yeah, anxiety is my friend and it's my enemy and it's everything. It's all around me. I feel anxiety. I have anxiety. I don't know to what level. It's hard when you get into comparisons and you start thinking like, well, that person has anxiety, and they're able to do X, Y, and Z. So, and then you want to make judgments on anxieties. But I think it's really hard to judge anxieties. Speaking for myself, I deal with anxiety all the time, every day. And of course, the podcast itself, I have anxiety over it. I thought about podcasting before and I had anxiety over it. Then I just assumed that I didn't have strong enough ideas to present to the world, or even if I did, I wouldn't present them in a way that I would feel proud to stand behind. Or, even if all those boxes were checked, it would still lead me to a point where I was just afraid that I would be found out to be something that somebody that everybody could point at and make fun of. The people who are actually out there doing it are doing a good job, and when I do it, there's just going to be some reason why I'm not those people, and then it's going to become obvious to me, and then I'm gonna I'll start digging a hole somewhere and just bury my head in it, and that will be the end of my podcast. So that's how I felt.
Yeah. I think anxiety is much easier to deal with, especially when you're talking about things like a podcast, when you have somebody else along for the ride. Anything creative, when you've got like a co-pilot, it's just so much better. It just kind of opens up your brain a little bit more. And honestly, like you kind of get stuck in this whole thing of like your own thoughts. And you're just kind of, and sometimes that's, first of all, it's not healthy when it's always just your own thoughts. But there are times where you're just like, you get stuck in a loop and it's the same thing. And, we know how good it is to have an extra person when you're trying to create or you're trying to just do something that kind of gets your mind off those feelings and those thoughts. Anxiety for me, it rules I like to call it a mind control device. That's kind of what it is to me. And I think that there are going to be people out there that relate because anxiety can rule your whole life. And there are times when I think that it's too much to overcome, and then there are times where it seems easy to overcome, if that makes sense. It really just depends. And obviously every different situation comes from like is different. It's a different level of anxiousness. And I think probably maybe the best way to compare it for maybe somebody that's listening or viewing this that doesn't know exactly what people are referring to. I think most people when they go to like the dentist or maybe even a doctor, there's that blue coat syndrome to where you go in and like your blood pressure is just a little bit higher because you're nervous to talk to a doctor or something like that. And that's kind of probably the best way to describe it, just on a general level. But obviously, it's so many different levels. And the first thing we're going to get into is basically the physical symptoms and the mental symptoms of anxiety. Now, there's a lot of things here, like, here I have on my symptom list racing heart, sweaty palms, stomach knots, muscle tension, or some people say muscle tension. I don't get a lot of that. I do get probably like the stomach knots. I think everybody probably knows what the stomach knots. It's like asking somebody like if they know what butterflies like are, when you have like the butterflies or goosebumps or something like that, which is weird that all these things are named after animals, isn't it? But either way, I think that the thing that kind of resonates with me is the mental symptoms, the racing thoughts, the catastrophic thinking, the brain fog I can definitely get into. And I take a daily antidepressant that's supposed to be for more of anxiety than depression. It's supposed to help both, but it's supposed to definitely help with anxiety. I don't feel like it does help, but I know those things are different with everybody. So I just want to talk a little about with you, like, do you have more physical symptoms of anxiety, or do you feel like you have more mental symptoms, or is it kind of like an even balance?
Yeah, I would say it's an even balance. I definitely experience both. I have physical symptoms. My hands like to get ice cold. They like to get clammy. I mean, I feel like I'm a big hand sweater, so that's great. It's a feedback loop of anxiety there. If you're hanging out in a situation where
Clammy,
you're going to be
another animal term.
right. Yeah, clammy. What are other terms? Crustacean-y, maybe.
I
Sure.
get that in my nose.
Oh yeah. You gotta blow that out.
Yeah, you got to get that out of there.
So I get that. What other physical symptoms do I get? I get, the heartbeat quickens a little bit. I think that's pretty normal for any situation that might give you anxiety. And and then I get the mental side, right? I get the meta conversations and the racing thoughts and the ideas that, all the negative thoughts of what might happen. That happens as well. Now, there is one thing that I get in extremely anxious situations, and this is like a crushing feeling in the chest. And I've had this before once or twice playing live shows. And I had this a few years ago. I played a show, and on stage I was playing, and I just felt like my chest was caving into itself. It was like I was having a heart attack. And of course, that's the exact situation you don't want to have that happening because, everybody's looking at you. So it's actually true that everybody's looking at you. It's not just in your head. So
But they have
dealing
clothes
with
on in this situation. They're not all in their underwear. Well, maybe.
some, who know, you
Yeah.
don't know where I was. Who
I
knows?
don't know where you were, I guess.
We like to have a good time
That's
and
true,
there's no
yeah.
judgment.
I
It's
hear
a
you.
judgment-free zone.
Okay.
So, yeah, so I was having this happening, and I don't know, maybe it was it was on the edge of maybe of a panic attack, but so I was just having this and I remember just having to work through it because, I'm playing songs and I just had to figure it out, work through it, get some water. But the pain in my chest was crazy. That's not the typical one. Like I'm walking in the door to a party that I was invited to. I wouldn't get that pain there, but that was a very acute situation that I experienced that. So I do know that's possible for me as well. Yeah.
Can I ask you a question about that with performing? Like, did that make it like that much difficult to actually perform? I'm assuming, like, while you having this, because your mind is on that, but your mind is also on the performance, correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
And so
It was just, yeah. Well, yeah. To answer your question, it's hard because I'm just normally you're putting a little bit of a front on, right? You're like, you want to look like you're enjoying the music and you want to try to be actually not just pretending, but like actually enjoying it yourself as much as you can in that moment, as much as anybody can who deals with anxiety. But there is, that pushed me right up to the edge of that thin veneer of a mask that you're wearing. And my The mask that I was wearing at that point just felt like it was razor thin between what people were seeing and the turmoil that was going on the inside. So yeah, I'm trying to look like I'm having fun. I'm not stressed out. I'm trying to look like I'm relaxing, yeah, and just enjoying myself. And it was extremely hard.
How long did it last? Like, how long did it last? Do you know? I mean, I realize that probably in the moment it probably felt like it lasted a lot longer than it should have, but do you know?
Yeah, it probably felt like a 10 to 15 minute sort of ordeal, but I think in the moment it could have been somewhere like 5 minutes or maybe 3 to 5 minutes of just like my chest feeling like it was crushing into itself. I don't remember exactly how it went away. I think it kind of tapered off as I recognized that it was anxiety induced. Like I didn't actually think I was having a heart attack. So, in between songs, I would try to take moments to, get a drink and calm myself down and try to force myself to go down thought processes that I thought would sort of like ease the situation.
I hear you because I think that, first of all, you are basically what you have to do in that situation is you have to kind of convince yourself that you're in a real life situation, that everything's fine. I think there's a big misconception because you might see it on TV and stuff where somebody's having an anxiety attack and they always say, just breathe, just breathe. And that doesn't.
What else are you going to do?
Right. That doesn't work because it's like, well, I mean, I am breathing, or there would be a different scenario here. So I think we should probably just kind of note to people out there that doesn't really help for that situation. It's more about like just making sure that they recognize that they're in the here and now and that it's not, whatever they're feeling that, that they're there and it's all in the head. And even then, like that can be kind of a tight line to walk because if you say, hey, it's all in the head, it's a tough thing to even talk about in the first place. I know what you're feeling, but I had because I haven't been up in front of a lot of people since school anyways, and like not too many times in my life. I had a comedy roast in 2011 when I worked at the restaurant that I worked at, and we were roasting my boss, and we were pretty, if you've seen a Comedy Central roast at the time, that was the channel they were on. They were harsh and they were crazy. So we were having a good time. Right before that, first of all, I smoked a little bit of marijuana, which was probably not the greatest idea because I was already nervous as hell. And for people that don't know, or for people that might think it does, marijuana doesn't really help with anxiety. I mean, I don't know. I guess it can be kind of a fine line. But for the most part, I'm going to say it probably doesn't help because especially if you get the paranoia effect from marijuana, which a lot of people will get, because that's just going to drive your thoughts mad and even more. Right before, so I did that, and then I actually had to go into my room, and we had this outside, and we had everything set up. But I had to go into my room about 5 minutes before we performed, and I was in there in front of a fan because I was starting to sweat. I almost feel like I was getting nauseous, so I felt like maybe I was gonna throw up or whatever. But after the initial couple of minutes, I went up, I just did it, and I think with me, it might be a little bit tougher when you're doing a song because it's not like people are going to applaud like during the song or anything. But with me, I got up and I ripped my first couple of jokes and everybody laughed, and that just brought all the tension down for me. It's like, okay, everybody's enjoying themselves. So in that aspect, it was pretty quick for me. But like I said, if you're performing a song, I mean, they're not going to clap during the song. I don't even know if they're going to clap until the very end of the whole performance. I don't really know if they even do it in between songs, So, and I think that affirmation in that situation does help bring down your anxiety. You're like, oh, I belong here kind of thing. So I do get what you're saying about that. Uh, I guess,
Can I ask you a question about that?
yeah, go for it.
How it'd be funny if you just said no. No, no questions.
No questions, please.
What do you think it would have been like if you ripped those first couple of jokes and nobody laughed?
And nobody laughed? Well,
Yeah.
if you want to add to more of my anxiety and make me think about it, I haven't really thought about it, and I think that's probably a good thing. I guess I don't really know. There is one thing I have confidence in, and that was always my writing skills, whether it be music or, sometimes I get into create like short stories, or I've even wanted to write screenplays or whatever. But my comedy writing as well, like I was pretty good at it, and I had a lot of confidence in it, so that helped. Did that take precedent at all in your brain? Because obviously you are a confident musician. I've known you my whole life pretty much, and I know how good of a writer you are, how good of a singer you are, how good of a guitar player you are. Did that help at all? Would you say that, like, if you I'm wondering if you even thought about it though in the moment. Like if that's something you could say to yourself, like, well, come on, I've done this, I'm good at this.
Yeah, it doesn't. I mean, honestly, I feel every time. So when I play music live, most of the time I'm feeling secondhand embarrassment. Well, no, that's the wrong way to say it. I'm feeling firsthand embarrassment, but I also am feeling a form of secondhand ham too is good, but secondhand embarrassment by projecting myself out into the audience and then imagine seeing myself, and then even in that imagination, I'm embarrassed at what I'm seeing all the time. So this,
Yeah, that I could see how that could have a negative effect almost because
yeah, yeah.
if you already think that you're doing bad and then you project yourself as an audience member watching that you're doing bad, I feel like that's just almost like doubling up on the anxiety. But you got through
Yeah,
it. Was that near the beginning or was that like actually in the middle of the performance?
no, that was like 3 songs, maybe like the third or
So you didn't
so
feel much
song in.
going in. I mean, I'm sure you felt like your normal amount, but like it didn't.
No, no, no. Well, let me, yeah, if
Go
I
ahead.
may.
Go ahead.
When I went into it, I felt so much anxiety that's almost like the disassociation period, because you're doing this thing that you're so much not wanting to do, that it's like somebody just put a foot on your back and shoved you down a slide that's way too long. You don't know how to swim, and it's a water slide, and it's like 10 feet deep at the bottom. So the whole first like 20 feet of falling down this slide, you're almost like it's like you're in your Alice in Wonderland, and you're still in the tunnel part that's going down, right? So I think that it's more of disassociative, like out of body in that sense. And then probably by like the second or third song, I feel like that's when I'm like actually grounded in the reality of what I'm doing in my anxiety. And maybe that's when the chest crushing part came in, and then you got to work your way out of that. And then you got to swim after that. And luckily I didn't, drowned in a 10-foot deep pool at the end, but that's how it goes.
Well, first of all, I always enjoy a second hand. And second of all, I
Yeah.
just want to say that this kind of touches on something that, like the high functioning anxiety, where it's kind of like looking put together while falling apart inside, right? And you've basically kind of just described that. It's like you have to, you're in your, you're trying to portray yourself as someone you're not in kind of in a realistic way because you are feeling this anxiety and this anxiousness that people don't really notice. And it would be kind of interesting to because obviously when we experience those kind of things, we think it's so bad, right? But it would be kind of interesting to just get like some kind of survey of people who watched a concert or watched something and this person on stage experienced anxiety and to find out if these people actually noticed that said anxiety, right? Like it would be very interesting because I think mostly they're probably not really going to notice it too much, right? They're just there, especially because it's not like they're that in tuned to that, you know. They're there for a specific reason, for music in your case, or comedy for my part, and they're more in tune to that, and they're trying to enjoy themselves. So it would be interesting to kind of know, like, if people actually notice that anxiety. You know, I'm sure there are levels to where they would notice, like a panic attack or something like that, but you clearly didn't have that. And I do want to talk about panic attacks a little bit. I don't think from what I've heard people kind of explain the way they are, and for everybody it's going to be different, but from how I've heard a few people explain panic attacks, I don't really think that I've had one in that sense of how they explain it, or maybe I just don't have them. I also think that or wonder if it's just different for other people. Like, okay, so I don't experience panic attacks, but I experience, something else that's kind of relevant in that nature. But I don't think I've ever been to the point where, oh my God, I can't breathe. I've got to call the ambulance or something, and where I think it's something else. Now, what you described for about 10 or 15 minutes does sound like a panic attack, but it seems like where some people would just let it escalate, you just kept going. And I do wonder at that situation, it's kind of a catch 22, right? Because if you would have stopped playing at that moment, would you have felt relief? Or, by a twofold situation where you're
Yeah.
not thinking about it, but also you're letting go, and then it would be a little bit more relief. So, would you describe that as what you had as a panic attack, or would that be
Yeah, I would say it was panic attack like.
adjacent?
It was panic attack adjacent. The difference is that so we can talk about this, and I have had panic attacks, quite a few of them in the past. The thing that makes them worse is usually that an element of the unknown being present. The thing about this particular situation is there wasn't as big of an unknown variable. So I had feeling, which is similar to feelings that you can get during panic attacks. So maybe it was something like a panic attack, but but how to resolve it was more immediately obvious to me. So you are right. You did touch on something that I think you're right about, which is that if I had stopped playing immediately and ran away and ran into the woods, it would have subsided.
Oh, you were playing at the fire festival. Was that where you were?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that'd be running into the water
Oh,
maybe,
yeah.
but yeah.
Sorry. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. So well, would it have subsided? No. Okay. If I'd done it that way, because then I would have ruminated on the idea that like everybody just saw me do this. And then I would have been like, now that's a big unknown. But if the show could have stopped early for some other reason, say like a fire broke out and people were like, hey, stop the show. We got to go out into the street.
Got you. Yeah.
I would have actually felt better at that point.
I get
Yeah.
it. Yeah. If you weren't the cause of the show ending
Exactly.
early.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. Yeah. It's very interesting because I don't think that I've ever really experienced that, but I think what my brain does is it puts it somewhere, all these experiences for me, and then I think I deal with a lot of stress or whatever in whatever way my body does. But then, obviously that leads to the anxiety, leads to later stress, leads to pain, which leads to an unhealthy person, right? Like, and we can talk about that with depression, which we will do an episode on at some point because they do kind of go hand in hand.
Yep.
But we can talk a little bit about common triggers of anxiety. And I think you kind of discussed one, which is basically the fear of performing. I guess it'd be public speaking. It's just generally it's called fear of public speaking. But in your case, you were, actually doing music. So it's speaking in rhythm. But, change, uncertainty, conflict, having deadlines that you have to adhere to. And I think if there's one thing that we should kind of go over, it's that I didn't really feel a lot of anxiety when I was younger, when I was a kid. I don't know if it kind of gradually progressed more with you too, but that's kind of what happened with me as I've become an adult and learned like the way the world is and everything. That's fueled my anxiety and depression. Do you feel that way as well, or how were you
Oh,
in
yeah, for sure.
school? Like, were you? Because I don't
I was
feel like I was.
oblivious. Yeah, in school. Well, okay. We got to separate school because if we're talking grade school or high school, there is a huge difference for me.
Okay.
So for me, grade school up to probably sixth grade there was lots of obliviousness, but there was a certain amount of social anxiety that was present because I wasn't necessarily very outgoing, but but I also had like pockets of just ignorance in terms of like the perception of people. I was afraid of people in a very one-dimensional way, but it wasn't until junior high, like seventh grade, that I suddenly started seeing myself through the eyes of other people, and I was imagining it in that sense. That was a different layer of anxiety. So yeah, in grade school, I think that I was more like actually in grade school, I was probably more severe. I don't know, ADD. If I look at my actual grades and behavior, I think that I was probably a troublesome kid. But yeah, in high school, I started really seeing myself in the third person, and that's when an extreme amount of social anxiety came into my life.
Well, you bring up a good point. I was a pretty shy kid. I actually kind of opened up a little bit more in junior high, high school. But there's always like, it is kind of weird though, right? Because you go into the system of high school, and in some places, it's like a lot of people. Some places don't have that many people. Some places are so small where you're sharing a high school with the elementary kids. From where we grew up, obviously, I think did you go to West or Central?
Benzie.
Okay. Okay. So, but here's the weird thing with me is that isn't it kind of weird that we talk about how bad like mental health is for people, especially nowadays, and anxiety and depression and all that stuff come into play. And one of the first steps of pre adulthood is going in to a high school where you're going to have all of the, like, you're going to learn a lot about anxiety during these 3 or 4 years of your life. And I
Yeah.
think, because there's the social circle and a relation, the whole popularity contest and all this stuff that really shouldn't be that important, but for some reason during high school it is. So I do find it kind of interesting that that's like the first time where we're really thwarted into it. And we have to battle that. Like there's just some people that can't. And nowadays, with kids in school and social media, where anybody can get on and say anything they want and they can be mean because they know they can do it without having to be face to face with somebody, it's got to be like just so much worse, right? So, yeah, I think it's really interesting that that's kind of what life is in America is you're kind of thrown into that. Probably, well, not just America. I mean, there's plenty of other countries where you're thrown into that scenario and you have to kind of navigate. And, how much worse is it going to be if you're the one that gets picked on all the time? Or, it's crazy. Luckily for me, I was kind of like a class clown and everybody liked the class clown at that time. I don't know if that's still popular in schools nowadays, but they liked that sort of thing. So I didn't really act out much. I did pop my teacher's balloon in 8th grade. And I felt really
Is that
bad
a
about that. That is not a euphemism, sorry.
okay?
She had a
Well, you gotta
St.
ask.
Patrick's Day balloon, and she had a couple of them at the front of the class, and I was at the back of the class. And it was like a once in a lifetime shot. And my friend dared me to throw a tack, and I threw it, and it popped her balloon. She cried. I felt so bad. And so, but I would do little things like that where, I just to kind of get a laugh and, to get somebody to like you or whatever it is, like as far as friendship or whatever.
Yeah.
Are there
Were you one of
anything?
those kids?
Go ahead.
Well, I was just ask if you were you one of those kids that would, if you got in early, you would write something on the chalkboard or on the whiteboard.
Wouldn't do that. Unfortunately, in high school, I was smoking weed, and I would smoke weed with one of my good friends right beforehand. And this is how we would end up. Like sometimes we would go to Central and we would go eat breakfast because we had just smoked weed, and breakfast was tasting good at that time when you're young. And sometimes we would just leave. We'd be like, "Well, we don't want to be here anymore." It was really weird. Like, and we lived kind of
Okay.
far away. It was like a 15-20 minute drive to my high school, and we didn't have busing when I was there, so we had to drive ourselves. So it was very. I mean, there's almost another part of anxiety, right? Like no busing was available. And now everybody's got to like find a ride, drive themselves, or if you don't have a license, you got to be the loser that rides with somebody else, or at least how you see yourself. So I remember being, the band TLC, right? Yeah. I remember being in my best friend's car, and I was on the passenger side, and we'd be riding to school, and their song "No Scrubs" was really popular at the time, and one of the lines in the songs is in the passenger side of your best friend's ride, and I was always like, "Oh God, that makes
That's where you were.
makes me feel like a scrub." I guess I don't know.
Yeah.
It was just really weird. But do you have any examples? Like, do you have anything from high school that you want to talk about that may have that has to deal with anxiety?
Yeah. There's two different situations that really stick out in my mind when I think about very specific anxiety inducing situations that I had. So I think one of them was like the first time there was a girl, I think in junior high, and she was passing me notes. And I just had this really bizarre behavior just came out of me of like, I just decided to ignore everybody and like sit in the corner of the classroom and stare at the wall because I didn't even want to like acknowledge anybody. For some reason, the whole thing embarrassed me. And she'd write me a note every single day, and it went on for like a couple weeks. And when I look back now, I don't even understand really what my goal was or what I was trying to achieve. It was literally just to survive like the hour during that class or the day. There was so much anxiety in that situation. And we can dig into that and like what it means and why that matters. But that was probably like 7th grade. I think that happened to me. And then one of the other really big anxiety situations was in, I believe this was 9th grade. And I had my band with my friends that I'd started the summer before. And during my friend's English class, I think it was in 9th grade, he had this idea that for his project, it was going to be us playing a show. And so what happened is during his English class, we had set up in like the auditorium or like the place where they do plays and stuff. So we set up there, and to this day, I still don't know how they even got me into the building to do that, because yeah, it was one of those, I was just out of body, like disassociated, like I wasn't even there, I don't think. Mouth was like dry as a desert for just like an hour straight. I'm sure you've experienced that if in those types of situations. And we had played this show, we started playing it, and so his English class is sitting, and it's a class of my peers. And then the class was taking place right before the lunch period. And so the auditorium at Benzie or that specific one was positioned in a way to where you had the stage and you had the seating that faced the stage. And then behind that seating, you had a big curtain. And you open up that curtain and it's the entire lunchroom where everybody's sitting eating lunch. So while we were playing that show, that curtain opened up and it became the entire lunch group of all my peers watching me play my first show live, when I had like 6 months of experience playing my instrument and singing. Singing is an extremely personal kind of feeling thing to do. Performing anything, I think, like orally, make a joke on that. You can insert it if you need. Right. So rapping, singing, anything you're doing, it just feels extremely personal and vulnerable to do that. So yes, and I'm already the kid in school where I was extremely shy. Like you said, like in high school, I would never got bullied, but I was very, very shy. And I had my circle of friends, and I didn't really try to venture outside of that too often. So yeah, this curtain opens up, and it's probably like top 3 scariest moments of my life. And
What was
that's
the
that moment.
reaction after from some of your peers? Like, was it positive?
I think it was mixed, actually.
Was it? Oh, was
Yeah,
it?
I think it was actually mixed. I think so. If I were to actually go back as an adult now and listen to the reactions, then I think I would classify them as mostly positive. But I think that even when I hear somebody that is like if I hear somebody that describes something as a 7 out of 10, if they're talking about me, then they might as well be saying 4 out of 10. So in that situation, it felt really mixed in the moment. I remember hearing people being like, they were saying, "Oh, like that's interesting," or "You kind of sound like this," or "I think you guys," like a friend would come up and say, "Hey, somebody was said that like you guys sounded like this," and I think it was meant to be a compliment, but I had a really tough time hearing those types of things as compliments. And, and there were some, like sometimes I would get some, through a rumor or a pipeline or whatever, like some kind of comment that wasn't so favorable, and it would crush me.
Yeah, that's something I think. I don't know if that's anxiety based or depression based, but we often talk about this too. Like we're gonna put some of this stuff on YouTube, and people and you know how, and I've done YouTube before, and I think you've done YouTube at some point. And I think one of the biggest things is how you could have like 30 or 40 or 50 all positive comments, and all it takes is one. And that's really unfortunate that that's the way it works. But
Yeah,
I want to kind of go back to this girl who was handing you notes.
sure. Yeah.
And I want to actually talk about social cues and how I just kind of was talking a few minutes ago about how we're kind of thrown into high school and we're learning anxiety. It's almost like we're learning anxiety at that point. We're like, oh, what the hell is this feeling? We're not really up to date on our social cues either, right? Like there's a girl handing you notes, and I'm assuming this girl had a crush on you and that's why she's handing you notes. I don't know if that's true, but that was not true.
No, it was true, but
Okay.
yeah.
But the
I mean, the
social cue,
content of the notes,
okay,
right?
but I'm just saying, like the social cues, you just didn't know, like that was you having a lack of social cues or whatever at that moment in your life, being like, okay, this is what that means, and instead of embracing it, or maybe you just didn't like her back or whatever it was, you went to the corner
Yeah.
and said, I'm gonna go look at this wall because that seems like a better situation.
Yeah, I think what it was is that at that time, yeah, I just didn't like her back, I don't think. And
But you liked her
if,
front.
yeah, well, yeah, but the notes were one-sided, so,
Gotcha,
you
gotcha.
can't really tell. Right. So I would look, yeah, I was just really embarrassed. It just made me feel incredibly embarrassed. and like it was some sort of, boy, I don't know if I want to say this here, but yeah, I just felt really embarrassed. That was the overwhelming emotion that I felt, was embarrassment.
No, I get
And
it.
yeah, I mean, like, and I understood the content of the notes. I understood what they were for, why I was getting them. I just didn't know how to respond because I also didn't want to say no. Like, I didn't want to do anything. I just wanted to run away. Like, if I had my pick, I would have just tore the notes up, threw them in the air, and ran into the woods and never stopped running, like Forrest Gump style.
Gotcha.
That's basically what I wanted to do. That was my way of dealing with it.
Mm. I think that both of us are probably more passive than anything. Sometimes I am passive aggressive. Very rarely am I aggressive. I feel like I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think that you're probably kind of like that. Am I correct? Mainly you're just passive in the way. It's always hard, and I'm saying that because that kind of brings back to like you saying that you didn't really like her, but you didn't really want to tell her that because that just means that you're in tune with other people's feelings and you know
Yeah.
how that would feel. Like if you had done something like that and somebody said, ew, no, I don't want, I don't want that. And so I totally get that. Uh, and that kind of leads us into like the what if spiral, how like one worry can lead to just a bunch of worries. And we kind of discussed this a little bit before, where even in our conversations, in the way we talk, we're already like, we talked about preamble and how we're trying to correct ourselves before we even get the information out. Um, so that kind of rolls into that. But also, the what if scenario for me is crazy because this is what happens because I have a hard time leaving. I'm not agoraphobic. I just have a hard time leaving my house without thinking, especially now where it's getting harder and hard for me to drive. And so I have that what if scenario where it's like, well, what if I don't remember like, I always want to know where I'm going. I always want to know like what the traffic's going to be like. I want to know the roads. I don't want to be embarrassed. So we're kind of getting into that scenario where you're just talking about not being embarrassed. I don't want to look like an ass on the road, even though I know that most people aren't even going to know. They're like, I'm in a car. Like, it's not like they're going to like go up real close and take a paparazzi pic and be like, oh, this guy's a fucking idiot, on the road. But obviously your brain thinks different. And that's where I get is like, if I got to leave or especially if it's something important, like if it's just going to the store, that's not so bad. But if it's like a doctor's appointment or, I have a scheduled, endoscopy in a couple of months, I'm sure that's going to just rev up my nerves the closer it gets, and all those worries are going to keep going because I think about that stuff all the time. So I guess I just want to know if like I mean, do you probably get that too, where worries just spiral into like all it takes is one, right? And then it can just boom, it can just go crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, I do definitely spiral into what if situations. Mostly for me, where it intersects with anxiety is health anxiety. So I get a lot of health anxiety, and this is where the what if really plays into it. If I feel a pain, or sometimes I don't have to feel anything. I can just have a sense of, I don't know, you stand up too fast and you're lightheaded, but it's like, is that really why you got lightheaded, or is there something going on? Is it you have an iron deficiency, or do you have some, who knows what it could be, and then you start searching online, and
Which is
then,
never healthy, right? Because like
yeah,
anytime you
usually,
search online, it's like you read everything and then you pick out the worst. So, and
yeah,
usually, not always, but usually brain tumor is somewhere in the worst thing. And you're like, oh, that's what it is. It's a brain tumor.
yeah,
And that's a big,
yeah,
that's anxiety right there for people that don't know.
yeah, and not to get too TMI on any symptoms I might have, but it just seems like my WebMD experience always leads me to a pipeline that ends in like some sort of bowel cancer. So I have that. That's the cross I'm
I
bearing,
get
I
that.
think.
Yeah. Especially with
Yeah.
having digestive issues, you're going to get there. And it's
Yeah.
like, I guess they have to list it, but it's like, man, it's
Which
tough.
and digestive issues has a really interesting link with anxiety in general. And I've seen doctors with digestive and stomach issues that I've had over the years. And, I had one doctor that told me that, she said, I know you deal with anxiety, and there's like this inexplicable link that just happens between people who have anxiety and stomach issues or digestive issues. And it's really interesting. And I always wondered what causes the other, or if it's a mutually kind of like, what's the word you'd use for a relationship where these two things are friends and they just create a friendship that nobody wants?
Frenemies? I don't know.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. So that's what I think is happening.
No, I get it. I think that because there are a couple of digestive diseases that they really do say like either stress like causes them or definitely exasperates like the things. And I think IBS is one of them, right? Like that's one of the things where people will get and I don't know if there's people out there that really do realize that, but when you have this enough, your brain is tricking you into all these thoughts and these worries, and then in turn that gives you some things, whether it's digestive issues or other health problems, muscle cramps, whatever it is, and that just makes it worse, right? And then you start thinking about what that might be. And so it's layered on top of other layers. And so I can see where it could just be a huge problem.
Yeah. What now? I wanted to ask you a little bit more about the what if because I thought it was interesting. I wanted to hear like what are the what if scenarios that you think you typically deal with. I know you talked about just like you getting into the car and driving to the store, and you're dealing with what if are those what ifs like what if a what if a semi crosses the center line and takes me out, or is that kind of what it is, or
Oddly
is there something
enough,
else?
the actual accidents or whatever, whatever you want to say, are probably down on the list. It's more about like if it's somewhere where I haven't been in a long time, or if I haven't been into town in a long time, it's like, okay, what are these roads? What roads are one lanes? What about they just put a roundabout in here. Is it a one lane roundabout? Is it a 2 lane roundabout? Is it a 3 lane roundabout? Which lane am I supposed to be in? Where am I going to go? It's a lot of that stuff. But what you said is definitely there. It's just not, ironically, it's not number one when it comes to the list. But I also have just kind of like, it's all about, like, how I'm gonna feel because I constantly feel like I'm in enough pain, whether it's because I have neck issues, but whether it's that or whether it's just the anxiety or depression causing that, I often feel that that is a big part of my anxiety. It's like, well, if I go somewhere, am I still gonna feel the way I feel right now, or is it gonna make me feel better? Is it gonna make me feel worse? So it's a lot of that stuff. And I think that, with any kind of pains that we may feel physically, like you had discussed, I did say that in the beginning, like I felt like I had more mental symptoms than physical symptoms. But I also do believe that a lot of those mental symptoms just eventually manifest themselves into physical symptoms, right? And
Yeah.
it kind of makes things worse. Whatever you have, I get a lot of headaches. I get a lot of tension headaches that are above my eye, and sometimes they'll switch spots like the next day, and they won't go
Yeah.
away.
Oh boy, have you gotten these ones where I get these sometimes where they're headaches where it just feels like there's like certain pinpoint spots that you can find with your finger that when you find them, it feels like it's sending a lightning bolt through your head. I don't know what these are called, but I've gotten these over the last few years. Sometimes,
Wow. I don't think
yeah,
I have. Like you're pointing in, and I'm not sure if you're just pointing to point, but you're pointing
like
more.
I've had like here.
It's like,
I've always wondered. I think there's like a muscular, like skeletal kind of thing where maybe the day before something was happening and I was just clenching my jaw, or something was happening, some sort of anxiety induced stressful situation that just caused like some nerve somewhere on my scalp to be very inflamed. But sometimes I'll get these where, and it'll be like, yeah, it'll just be like a lightning bolt goes across my head and I can actually find it sometimes. Like I'll find like with my fingers, I'll feel it like on the side of my head or maybe somewhere on the back. Um, and just
I
what?
don't have
Yeah,
headaches too much in the back. They're always above my eyes, and I think a lot of that is from my neck issues, and it's usually like I can't sleep. I don't sleep well. And
yeah,
that probably also relates to anxiety and depression. So everything does kind of connect there. And I want to talk a little bit about like time-based anxiety because I wouldn't necessarily say this is a real bad part of my anxiety, but it'll probably take me a couple of hours to fall asleep every night. And I'm going through all kinds of things in my head. And I think we've discussed this before, but the easiest way for me to fall asleep is if I'm creating something. I can't count sheep or whatever. I have to create something in my brain, whether it's like, musical or something, some kind of writing, some kind of fictional writing, or if it's maybe I'm creating like my dream house. I'm building my dream house in my head while I'm trying to sleep. But I have
That's interesting.
thoughts among
Yeah.
thoughts, and it does drive me nuts. So, is there a specific time of day where it's more that it's affecting you, anxiety is affecting you more, like during that time of day?
Boy, I think it's more in the first half of the day for me. I do feel anxiety. I can feel anxiety at all times of the day. And at nighttime, I definitely have some sort of bedtime anxiety that I deal with. Or I don't know if it's anxiety, but it's a bit of something that keeps me awake. An active mind, a racing mind. So I think it's similar to what you're describing. But I think that actually I have a higher just baseline level anxiety probably on the first half of the day.
Okay, interesting. All
Yeah.
right. Yeah, and I'm not saying that mine is like progressively worse at night. I don't really find that as too much of a problem because I've adjusted to that, right? Like I know that that's how long it takes me to fall asleep. So, I know when to go to bed or whatever it is. Anxiety affects me probably at the same level all the time for the most part, unless I have something to do. And I will say that there's a lot of times in my life, lately especially, where I don't have a lot to do up until recently. So if I have an appointment the next day or if I have to actually go out of the house the next day, that's going to affect my sleep. I most likely will not get very much sleep because I'll be overthinking that too. So that's where it really kind of comes into me. So it really just kind of, it's like a situational thing. But at all times, I do experience it. I have a lot of animals here, so that kind of helps me. I do believe kind of get it. They cause some anxiety, but they also kind of help relieve some anxiety,
Yeah,
in that
I've
part.
heard the chirping birds, and I don't know how that would affect my anxiety.
They can get
They're-
pretty
Yeah.
loud during the day, and luckily I usually turn on one of like those Vivo channels that you can get like through a smart TV, and I throw on like a 90s music or 2000s music, and they tend to like that. Although there's only so many times I can hear bop and I'm too sexy and all these songs like oh they're
Yeah.
okay, but when they're playing them like every couple hours it kind of gets annoying too.
Now, those aren't the kind of birds that repeat anything, right? They just chirp.
Yeah, the I have a parrot, but I've only had him for like 9 months and he does not talk. He just which is almost I don't know if it's work because they each have their own annoying thing that they will do. Luckily, it's just not that often.
I see.
And a lot of times I'll go out of the house, like go outside or something, rather than be like, hey, shut the fuck up, bird, because he doesn't know what shut the fuck up means. That's really just for me, and that's not going to help. But
Yeah.
I think it's a good time for our fake sponsors. So we got a couple of them here today. This week's podcast is fake sponsored by Anxiety Box, the subscription service that sends you monthly texts of new things to worry about. This is great. This month, featured texts include why is it called a building when it's already built? And what if birds are watching me? The Anxiety Box, making you overthink one text at a time. Also, this podcast is fake sponsored by Inner Thoughts Inc. Are you tired of your boring thoughts? Do you need a ghostwriter for your internal monologue? Our ITI team will upgrade your inner voice with witty commentary, dramatic narration, and occasional random facts about penguins. Here at ITI, we pride ourselves in making your inner monologue more interesting. Penguins can fly underwater and have waterproof feathers. Inner Thoughts Inc. We don't know what we're doing. All right. So, any thoughts on those
Okay.
sponsors today, Brandon?
I'm going to be thinking about that building one for a little bit. So
Yeah,
that's you
that'll
got.
just give you more
Yeah, you got
anxiety.
me. Yeah, you
I
got
don't
me with that one.
recommend the anxiety box, by the way. I feel like it's doing not what it's supposed to do.
Yeah, I've been a long time subscriber, and I was thinking about
Yeah, you
canceling,
should
but
probably kick that habit.
yeah.
I just want to
But now that
say,
they're sponsors of the show,
well, yeah, that's true.
I I want to be nice to them.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you're right. We can't let our fake sponsors down because they will get angry and they will get out of here and they'll probably go do Dax Shepard's podcast
yeah.
or somebody else's
And what are
podcast.
they? And can you remind me what are they paying us right now?
They're paying us in it's like an adopt a penguin thing where we just get pictures of of our penguin each month and we get to send letters back
Yeah.
and just kind of see like how the penguin's doing.
Are they like those sad photographs where you wonder why the photographer just didn't give the penguin a sandwich
Well,
and
actually,
it's
the
just
one
kind
I
of
got, he is feeding him a sandwich. And
oh, that's
yeah,
nice.
it's really nice. They've got some cool ones of them diving. I really like that. Also, there was one where like the photographer was diving. So I think the penguin took the picture on that one. I don't know. They must be really close, which makes me wonder why we're even, adopting one from so far away when the photographer, I think, just lives there. Or maybe the photographer is a penguin.
Yeah.
I'm not even 100% sure on that. I just want to let everybody know that before the show, I ate 10 100 grand bars, and let me tell you, I feel like $1,000,000. All right, had to get that one out.
Okay.
All right,
Yeah.
so let's continue on with anxiety, and let's talk about social situations and anxiety. And this, we've kind of discussed some of this before, but we're going to kind of get into the pre-event anxiety and the post-event anxiety. um, or not post-event anxiety, more like an analysis of what happened, because I think after an event is when we're probably feeling a lot of relief that we got through it. You kind of discussed this already. I discussed it a little bit about talking about the comedy roast that we had and having that pre-event type of anxiety. I'm sure a lot of public speakers get this. I know I've read stories about big time celebrities or musicians who still throw up or do whatever before their performance. So they have it all the time. Fun fact, I had another roast the following year after my first roast where I experienced that. Second roast, no problems at all. So it was interesting enough to where my brain could actually go back and say, hey, we've done this before. It's all good. But that's not going to work for everybody. Obviously, other people have that. So
Yeah.
is there any other type of events, like maybe not necessarily performing, any other events? I talked about doctor's appointments and going places and things like that. Do you have any of that as far as with anxiety, like a pre-event type of anxiety, a PEA?
Sure, P's. I've had a couple good P's.
Yeah.
The biggest ones, if you would like to know, they're always centered around live shows. So the live shows that I've done, or maybe the ones that I will do, have always been the biggest anxiety events, and smaller ones that are, I think, more typical that the average person would identify with are social events and things of that nature, right? And nobody wants to, going to the dentist isn't a great experience. So, of course, there's anxiety. But I think that those are, yeah, there's a normal level of anxiety. And then there's, and there's also like baseline anxiety, right? So, and I feel like that feeds into this pre-event anxiety that you can have. And it creates this like loop back effect where it's way more than it should be because you're already dealing with the baseline. I don't think I have any new ones off the top of my head though. But what about, well, actually, there's one I want to ask you about. There was a time a while back where you and I were going to do a show. It was going to be your show, I think, mostly, but I was going to play possibly a song or two with you. And that event didn't happen. And I know that so I'd heard that you had run into maybe some audio issues, but I also suspected that there might have been some sort of pre-event anxiety that played into that. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I vaguely remember it, but I'm sure that you're probably right. And this is where, because this is kind of like a good thing to talk about, it's where your mind, I'm sure I probably did have some audio issues or whatever, but also I think that that's a good way to talk about how your mind will make excuses for things, right? Like, oh, this is why we can't do this. And in reality, it probably wasn't that bad and easily fixable. I had it. There was a time there where I had some equipment, and I believe I was, my friend Lee, I think you had met him, and we were doing some stuff together, um, and we had even gone as far as doing like a practice performance out in the garage area and stuff like that. I, I don't. Yeah, it was probably that, which was odd enough in itself because that was probably right around the time of the comedy roast, or it might even have been after the first one. Yeah, I mean, I vaguely remember that scenario. I was also gonna do, I don't know if that was a show that we were gonna do at Streeters, but Streeters was obviously big at the time here in Traverse, and it's no longer around anymore, but it was a big place. It was popular. And I had a couple of
Club,
friends.
venue,
Yeah, I
big
had,
dance floor, bar,
right.
DJs, and,
Yeah, it had
all
a
sorts
lot
of
of
kind of
stuff, and
EDM.
it was kind of, it was kind of like pretty big for our city at the time, right? And I had a couple of rap friends, hip hop guys. Their names were Jails and Six is their hip hop artist. I think they got a new album dropping soon. If anybody wants to go check that out, really cool guys, great musicians, and they were performing. And I believe at that time, Streeters was having battles with different rap bands, and then whoever won those battles would open up for a main event. And I remember them winning one, and then they ended up opening up for Royce to 5'9", which was cool. It was a really good show. I went there. It was really cool. But even just going, set aside performing at that venue for one sec, I have anxiety. First of all, I guess for the listeners and the viewers, I don't drink alcohol. So I don't like bars. I don't like to be around a bunch of people who are drinking alcohol. And so that was already out of my realm. I believe the woman that I was dating at that time was kind of probably more of the inspiration of me going there. Also these, my friends who are musicians, but if it wasn't for her, I probably wouldn't even have gone anyways, just because of anxiety and issues like that. So it's bad enough having anxiety about performing, but I didn't even really like those kind of atmospheres because I didn't like being around a lot of people that were drunk. And those weren't really kind of things where you could go and you could smoke marijuana and go there and still like have a good time, because my smoking marijuana was like a social thing. But if I did it socially, it would more be like at home and I'd be more comfortable. So that specific scenario that you're talking about, I don't remember completely. I do remember talking to a few different people about performing. I had another guy, his name was Bravo. He did a couple of verses with me on some songs. And, we had discussed that. And it was really odd because this guy is very outgoing. And when I started talking about performances, he, at first it was kind of like, yeah, yeah, yeah. And then he finally kind of broke down to me and he said, like, I don't think I can do that. And it was kind of, it kind of hit me. I was like, oh man, if you can't do it. And that kind of made it worse for me, right? Because this guy, he's an outspoken guy. He's good at like, in social situations and things like that. And so my brain was like, oh, damn, if this guy can't even do it, like, and that might have been around that time. I don't know. But yeah, I'm going to for sure say that anxiety was involved in that. It wasn't just because of audio issues. But
All
yeah,
right.
I mean, it was definitely, and that's where I'm going. Like we constantly make excuses for that, right?
Yep.
Because there was a time in society, and maybe even to some people still, which, those people honestly can go fuck off, but there are people that probably still think that that's a sign of weakness, right? Oh, you've got anxiety or depression. You're weak. You can't do this. You're weak. And so that makes it worse in itself, if you think about those people being out there. So yeah, I think that was definitely a situation.
Yeah. Well, I think that there's something that I want to riff on a little bit about when you were talking about how excuses are easy when you have anxiety. And it's this thought that I was having because I was thinking about this topic this morning. It's that the crazy thing about anxiety is that we talk about it like we talk about the anxiety we're gonna have in the future, or the anxiety we had in the past, or maybe ones that other people are feeling. We talk about it as if it's this like external thing that is like, I like to say it's like a top hat that you're wearing on your head, right? And it's this thing where if only you could realize it was there, then you could take this top hat off, and then you'd see it, you recognize it, and you'd be like, okay, I don't need this anxiety, right? You take it off. And so, and then it seems like the excuses are obvious, right? So from like me looking at you and say you're making an excuse about something, I can easily say that excuse is a result of the anxiety that you're feeling. But I think that the problem with anxiety is that it really is reality when the moment you're feeling it. And the excuses are not, they're not cheap throwaway excuses. They're actual, it feels like life and death. And it feels like not just the emotional response, but it even feels like the logical right response given the circumstances that you would do that. Like in that situation, let's just take that situation that you painted as an example with the show in the garage or wherever it was going to be, and there was some audio equipment you were setting up, and let's say you had some audio issues, and so that is a plausible excuse. But in that moment, I think that the emotions of anxiety really elevate it to such a point where logically, and I think that you're an intellectually, I think you're a smart guy. So, and I actually think this is more problematic. I feel like the smarter you are, the more problematic these anxiety excuses get, because you are better able to create these really plausible excuses. And in that moment when you're feeling this, it really feels like any sane person in that situation would come to the same conclusion that you just can't do it because the mixing board just won't work, or the speakers, they are just not outputting it properly. And so you just shouldn't do it. And it's only way later where you have that 2020 vision where you can say, oh, that was anxiety doing that and it wasn't me. So I think that's the crazy thing about anxiety is that you can't just, even if you prepare beforehand, in the moment, you're still living in an alternate reality. You're still in like a bizarro world where logic runs differently. And it's really, really hard to say, well, when I was sober, right? We'll just say anxiety is like a drug, right? So you can say when I was sober and I'm looking at this, that sober me had the thought to go to this party, and now this party is here, and right before the party, every little thing feels life and death. Like a bad hair day is literally a good enough reason for any sane person to be like, why would I go to this party? I'm having a bad hair day, right? So it's like the smallest thing, the smallest excuse you could find not to go. And that's what I was thinking before. But from a distance, you can look at that person and anxiety just looks like a funny top hat that you're like, why don't you just take that hat off and, and go to the party?
Yeah, I like all that. And I think it kind of brings into there's this effect that happens where I think, and this could be tied in with depression, where you actually don't want to say the real reason why you don't want to do anything when it involves anxiety because you feel like that person's not going to understand. And that's the mindset, right? It's like they just won't understand. And that's probably depression too, where like you just think nobody's going to understand the way you are and you don't want to be a burden, right? So you'd rather just say like this other excuse that they can easily understand and be like, okay, that makes sense, rather than getting into this babble for 5 minutes and be like, well, I can't do, I got these problems and these problems. And I think that that's a big part of it. I also think, and I'm not sure if we even have it on the list here, but we can get into it a little bit right now, especially with me. We talked a little bit about loving thyself, and I have a lot of self-loathing. I have a lot of issues with my personal experience. I'm missing a lot of teeth and I just don't like the way I look. Well, I've had girlfriends and relationships and things like that. And, I've had reassurance at times, but that's anxiety in itself. And that's probably could go into where you were asking me some of the things I worry about leaving. It would be that too. It would be like just my overall appearance. And it's like, oh, I don't, and because I have anxiety, I'm going to do less about it. But at the same time, it's still going to bug me and bother me. So those are just kind of a couple of facts that I wanted to throw in there is that, yeah, definitely, I think it's hard for people to like actually say how they're actually feeling to people because either one, they think they're a burden or they just don't think they're going to understand it or whatever it is. And then number two, I think just the way you feel about yourself is greatly affected by your anxiety in both ways.
Yeah.
So
I agree. I had a thought while you were saying that too, where it's like, actually, I think this is a point that has helped me before. So I don't know if there's anything that is helpful. Hopefully it's helpful to somebody else, but it's recognizing that this extreme like social anxiety and thinking of yourself before or during these types of events it has comparisons or similarities with narcissism in a way, because, um, and I mean that in the gentlest way possible, but it's really thinking about yourself more than you probably even should be, right? So I think
it's a
that
different kind of narcissism, right?
exactly,
Yeah.
yeah. And so recognizing that has helped me to say like, what's the antidote to that? And I have found varying levels of success by really focusing on other people as much as I can. And and I still struggle with this, but going into a social event, I really try to say like, instead of thinking about how this person is thinking of me, I'm going to really just think about this person. And that I found success with that.
Yeah, I agree. There's that old, I think, and it was kind of big for a while when, I don't know who said it. It's probably a quote that's been floating around for a long time. But basically, it's that thing where they say that every person, like, there's a million different perceptions of you out there, right? Well, probably not a million, but whoever you've met or talked to in your life, there's a different perception. So, and that's like a blow your mind fact too. When like I first heard that, it's like, oh yeah, everybody has a different perception of who you really are. And you're sitting here worried about everything about you. And in reality, you should just kind of be focused on them and making that work. We got breaking news, Brandon. Breaking news. breaking news. Are you ready for this? This is just in.
Yeah, hit me with it.
R. Kelly has been nominated for a Peabody Award. So congratulations to R. Kelly, who's in prison, I think, right now. All right. We'll continue on. And I think I want to talk about, well, we kind of already talked about like the stress of committing to plans, overanalyzing things. I want to talk a little bit about FOMO versus JOMO. And no, that's not a big time pay-per-view boxing match, but I do want to talk about the fear of missing out and the joy of missing out, because I do feel like it's different at each time. Like before you do something that you have plans for and you have a lot of anxiety, if you cancel those plans, all of a sudden you have JOMO, right? But for a little while, then after a little while, you start questioning. You start saying like, oh, I could have did this. I could have, and then you get FOMO. So I just want to kind of get your idea about, like if you've had kind of both of those, because they kind of like come together, and people may not realize that it's like, well, you can have one, you're like, I'm actually going to enjoy myself for not going to this or doing this or whatever. But then in a couple hours from that, you're going to be like, I fucked up, maybe I should have, or maybe you're looking at social media and wherever you were going, people are having a good time or whatever it is. So just, do you have any experience with that you want to talk about?
Yeah. So before this podcast, so this is the first time that I heard the word JOMO, which was earlier when I was going over some notes.
Gotcha.
And it's a really great descriptor of what this and JOMO is the joy of missing out. And I do experience this, but you're right. I experience FOMO afterwards. So I struggle with these things. At the last moment, I do try to find reasons not to do something so that way I can experience that highly coveted JOMO feeling. And it just doesn't last very long. And then you go into FOMO land, which is annoying. And it's not a fun place to be. What I try to do, I try to make decisions based on what I think I'll regret the least after I did it, and not what I feel like doing right before doing it. And that is how I really have to try to frame things. Otherwise, I'm always going to fall into these JOMO habits. So that's where I land with that. I mean,
I like that thought process, because there is one thing that happens when you have anxiety. Maybe we've kind of talked about it a little bit already, but it's the compilation. It's kind of, I guess it goes back to like having one worry and then it just like, exponentially grows into all these worries. But there's things that I'll do before I do anything, and it's like I try to play like all the scenarios that I can think of that might happen in my head and be like, okay, well, if this happens, how do I respond? If this happens, how do I respond? And in reality, it's like, I'm not going to remember how I'm supposed to respond to that. Like, it's really just trying to comfort me, but it's really doing the reverse effect. It's just making everything worse. But yeah, FOMO versus JOMO versus Cuomo. Sorry, that's the New York City mayor race. My bad. FOMO versus JOMO. Yeah, it definitely goes hand in hand. And there are some things where I don't go and I'm like, and there is truly the JOMO feeling. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm glad I missed that. But those were probably things I didn't really want to go to in the first place.
Do you ever do this thing where you have the JOMO and then you get a little bit of FOMO, but then when, say it's like somebody you live with or somebody you know, and after the event is over, you shoot them off a little text and you say, hey, how was that thing? And they tell you, it was not that good. And you get this like really happy feeling that you made the right choice, that you didn't actually miss out on something. And I feel like that's not what a healthy person ought to be looking forward to. But it is this little bit of like this insidious thing where it's like, I want confirmation that the event actually was worth missing. And that way my JOMO can, I can ride that off.
Yeah, you're confirming, you're just appeasing your anxiety at that point, right? And what you're describing, I call a FOMO sandwich, right? So there's the JOMO feeling with the joy of missing out, and then it goes to the fear of missing out, and then you get that text or whatever that said it wasn't that good, and then you go back to the joy of missing out. So it's a little FOMO sandwich, a lot better than a peanut butter and KY jelly sandwich. But yeah, I totally get that, and it's just like giving you affirmation that every thought that you had was right, which is probably not, like you said it, which is probably not a good way to think, because that just is not going to help your anxiety, and it's going to keep you going.
Yep.
And as we talk a little bit more about that, we can also talk about kind of overthinking during conversations and interactions. So, overthinking during conversations, I will say that this is probably where marijuana would help me, where I wouldn't like either I wouldn't overthink or I wouldn't care. Just say, what I wanted to say. And when I get a good buzz going on marijuana, I do have this is where it would help me in a social situation as long as I'm in my own environment. And so I would get, I'd probably be funnier, I'd probably be quirkier, and people probably would enjoy me more in that scenario. And also I just want to say really quick that because I kind of was talking about my environment. That's also another big thing that I worry about is anything that's not in my environment is a whole different worry for me because if I'm not used to that environment wherever I'm going, then it brings out a whole different set of anxiety. But do you have any thoughts on, overthinking during conversations or interactions or any examples that you want to share?
Yeah, sure. I think that this is a big issue for me. That I overthink. It's not overthinking. I've discussed this before, but this word that I use, I don't know if this is a real term, meta conversations, and it's the term for just having conversations in your head about the conversation that you're currently having, and it's really destructive to your ability to be in a conversation and be present and be authentically listening to the person who's talking to you. So it causes me to miss out on, important story points or pieces of information of the people that I'm talking to. It causes me to miss out on being present, and it's an annoying thing. I think it's a common it's a common thing for people who experience ailments like ADHD, and probably varying levels of anxiety, depression, and things like that too. But yeah, this is something that I struggle with. Yeah, what about you?
Definitely. I mean, when I'm thinking, if I'm not in a conversation and I'm just trying to think, like if I'm just by myself and I'm thinking, I do that, you know. It's almost like I'm arguing with myself inside my brain and it's ridiculous. But yeah, I totally get that. In interactions, especially and this is probably where anxiety goes. If I got to go visit a doctor, I have to like make sure that I used to not do this, but now I have to make sure that everything I'm going to ask is on a piece of paper because you know how it goes. Like you get there and then your brain just goes fucking blank. And I honestly think that
Yeah.
that's because it's probably the same thing with like police officers, judges. For me, it's almost like, and this is probably more of my anxiety talking again. They have like a power structure. Like, so they have the power when you're in front of those people, right? Because they have the knowledge of something that you don't have the knowledge for, and you're trusting in them to give you all the right information. So trust in other people is probably big in sense of anxiety because of that. And so yeah, I definitely get that. I did know an epileptic police officer one time, but he only did search and seizures. Anyways, yeah. So but I just
That's good.
yeah. Was that a good
Keep
one?
that.
Okay. Uh
Yeah, put it in.
okay.
Put it in. Leave it in.
But
Yeah.
yeah, I get it. I mean, I totally have those kind of interactions with myself and when I'm talking to other people. I think that one of the reasons in like even during this podcast, and I think I told you before, I feel like sometimes I'm commanding too much as far as the voice, talking too much. But I also think that by doing that, it's making me think less. But then I'm probably sure that in that aspect, that's probably making you think more when I'm talking. But that's just how we work, right? When you're talking, I'm going to start thinking about stuff. Obviously, I'm listening. Same with you. But our brains are also going, oh, this. So it's certainly a thing that does affect me and obviously you. And I think that probably over the years we found different ways to navigate that and to curb that thought process. But I don't think that's ever going to go away. And I totally agree with you. I'm constantly saying, well, what I just said, did that mean anything? Or even if I tell a joke, was
Yeah.
that funny? Or, what I just said, was that smart? Or do people understand? So many thoughts.
So what do you mean, Matt? What do you really mean here?
Well, what I really mean is that an epileptic police officer only does search and seizures. And that's really the basis of the whole joke. It's a pretty easy joke. It's pretty simple. I feel bad for
It's not
saying it
bad.
too,
Yeah.
because I definitely
Yeah.
feel bad for all the epileptics out there that have to worry about going into seizures. So I apologize if that offends you, but I'm just trying to be funny to the people who aren't offended.
There's two things that I want to tag on with what you were saying that you made me think of. So the first one was that there's this huge correlation between anxiety and this idea of just the unknown. It seems like there's there I would venture to say that there has to be an element of the unknown. Otherwise, I don't even know if anxiety can exist. Can you identify a situation that isn't true for that?
Not off the top of my head. No, I agree with you. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, so it's really, which is also funny because so many of the topics that I know that we've talked about covering have to do with unknown or the unknown. Spoiler alert.
Right.
And so I think there is something there, and I wonder if it's about accepting that anything can happen, and that's an
That's,
inside
yeah,
thing.
that's an
Yeah.
inside joke, folks.
Yeah, but accepting that is probably one of the routes to, lessening anxiety is accepting the unknown, the fact that you can't control things, and the fact that you're never going to know everything, right? So the second thing that I wanted to bring up is that it's something that I've heard before that I thought was really interesting, but I heard somebody say that some people think in order to speak and some people speak in order to think. And what you were saying about talking, like you like the idea of when you go on like this like monologue that it actually keeps you out of your own head. And I was wondering if you identify as the kind of person who speaks in order to think, or if you think you actually are the kind of person who thinks in order to speak.
Well, I feel like that would probably be something that I probably do a little bit of both of. I don't want to be a cop out in that sense, but I do feel like I probably do a little bit of both. I also like, because I've noticed this with you really quick. I do like that, like our thinking, like my thinking is probably just something where I do this and
Yeah.
I do this. Your thinking is like you're following a fly in the room. You're kind of like, and I
Yeah.
think we all have our different ways of like how we ruminate. But I do, yeah. I think that I like to be. I don't know because I like to be improvisational. Improvisational. What is it? Okay, I like to do kind of like I like to be in an improv
Just
situation.
change the word.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I love that. Just
Just
completely
change
change
it.
the word
Yeah,
when you
which
yeah.
might help kind of identify who I am by just doing what I just did. But I like that sense. Like if it's but there are good days and bad days with that, right? Like there are days where I feel smarter than I normally do, and then there's days where I'm just like not feeling it. I don't know if you get that too. So yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I would have to say it's probably both, and I don't know if that's a cop out answer, if that's not something that you're satisfied with, but I'm sticking with my guns here.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that's how most people
Right.
lean. I myself would identify probably closer to the think in order to speak camp.
Yeah.
Is especially when they get tense or if it's a situation, if it's confrontational, I have a really hard time speaking my thoughts, which is something that annoys me quite deeply because these are often the situations where you want to very clearly and precisely state your points and I have a hard time doing it. I'm definitely a victim of when the adrenaline kicks up, I can feel my IQ drop like 30 points and it becomes really hard to communicate my thoughts.
And I think that might be pretty common, I mean, as far as like it's kind of like the whole feelings over facts type of situation where like people are responding to something emotionally and so they kind of shut down and like you've got this primitive part of your brain that's like kind of in shock and doesn't know what to do. I also want to say that like you were talking about like the fear, like we get anxiety from like kind of like the fear of unknown or whatever it is, of not knowing like what's going to happen. And I think that there's different reactions to this. I think that a lot of the reactions are anxiety based. And then I think there's people who use anger to experience that. Like people who, let's like randomly talk about somebody who might be either Christian or anti-Christian, like somebody who's maybe, believes in God or doesn't believe in God. And I don't really want to dwell into religion. I'm sure religion will be an episode at some point where we'll talk about some things like that. But there's a lot of people react with anger, right? When there's the fear of the unknown. It's kind of like how people are like upset or angry with like gay people existing or whatever it is. And a lot of that is just
Yeah.
because they don't know what that feeling is. So because they don't know it or have never felt it or don't agree with it, it's like, "Oh, get the fuck away from me," kind of thing. And so I do think there are different reactions. With us, it's just more anxiety based. You could even say that what those people are feeling is anxiety, but they're just projecting it with anger or distrust or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little
I
bit
agree.
about relationships and how they affect anxiety.
Boy, here we go.
Yeah, this is big, man.
Boy, I just got deja vu. Have we talked about this?
I don't know. Have we? Well, we've talked a little bit
I don't
about
think so.
overthinking conversations and interactions, which is exactly what you
Yeah.
just did right there.
I think I got like a double deja
Yeah,
vu
you
because
got a double.
the
Oh,
my yeah, I
that's
got a
double
double.
the
Yeah.
surcharge, by the way. You're gonna have to pay a
Yeah,
double charge a deja vu to get in there and see the good acts. Anyways, I want to talk a little bit about fear of abandonment versus fear of intimacy. And I would say that I have the first one. I have more fear of abandonment than fear of intimacy. What do you have?
boy, this is a tough one. I think that
I mean, I could be intimate with a potato. So it's not as fear,
okay, can you describe that? What that looks like?
well, I don't really want to go into it too much. I just want to say that it ends up being like a sour cream and chives situation.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah. You asked for it.
that's great. I thought maybe it would involve like a potato peeler and like some vegetable oil. I
It
don't
does
know though,
involve a
so
potato peeler, but that's already part of my body. So,
okay.
yeah,
All right. Pretty advanced stuff.
definitely. I'm an alien.
Yeah, so I think that fear of abandonment is probably the best one. I think that so I'm already going to launch into something here, but I think that it's about generating my value from the person that I'm with and their feelings towards me. And so when they don't give that to me, then it feels like a confirmation of the low value that I previously already saw myself as. It's like it's just more evidence that it's more evidence of my worth. And so I don't know if that goes into that. I think that is more of a fear of abandonment than intimacy if I had to pick one of those two categories.
No, I totally agree with you. My fear of abandonment has not just affected like my romantic relationships, and I'm sure you're probably talking about this too, but it's also affected just my general relationship with friendships and things. And there's also like even with family, there's a lot of times where I don't want to get too close, and it's not necessarily like a fear of abandonment of like they're going to leave. I get into that sense where like we've always talked about like anxiety of like things that could happen to us, and it's like, oh, we look it up on WebMD, and it's like, what's the worst thing? I get that with other people, especially if they're older with like, and I don't know how many people know this, but you and I are actually cousins and we had the same grandmother. I didn't see our grandmother for probably the last 20 years of her life. And it was like it was almost like if I it was kind of it's a selfish thing really, I think, mainly in my head, but it's because of anxiety and depression. I felt like that if I didn't see her, then when she finally did pass, which she did just a couple of years ago at 91, so it'd be great for if everybody could live that long, um, that it would be easier for me when she was gone. And I think that's with how a lot of my fear of abandonment is. It's like, okay, well, it would be easier. And I've obviously this year lost my mother, and that was probably the hardest one for me. But I almost feel like that because that was the hardest one, I don't know if I would ever get like if my anxiety and my depression would be that bad with anybody else in my life that passes away, you know? So it's kind of weird. In a sense, it's like, oh, it's a relief. I got the hardest one over with. But it's just an awful, weird way of thinking. But I totally agree with you. That's where my fear of abandonment. And of course I do have it in romantic relationships too. It's like, do they really love me? Do they want to be with me? What's this really about? At any point, are they going to leave? And then obviously, if you have relationships like that over and over, and they're the ones that end up leaving, I'm going to be honest here. Since I've been 18, since I've been in real relationships, not none of those weird junior high, high school relationships or whatever, I've never broken up with a girlfriend. It's always been them. And so I don't know what that says about me, but then obviously when you start thinking, when that stuff happens, then you start thinking, oh, it's me, right? It's like, well, if it's me, and then that goes back to the whole self-loathing, and then that just makes everything worse. And I honestly feel like, and this is bad to like think like this, and I hope I'm doing therapy now, so I'm hoping that I can help myself with these kind of thoughts. But I honestly don't think I'll ever be in a romantic relationship again because number one, of the fear of abandonment. And number two, I feel like that all the issues with me with anxiety and depression, that's a burden on them. And that's obviously part of anxiety and depression, right? Thinking that everything's being a burden. So it's just a big burden. And I think, well, nobody's going to want that. It's too much baggage. So that's just kind of my thoughts on, being in relationships and things like that.
Yeah. That's yeah, that's tough. That's how I mean, you echo a lot of the similar thoughts that I've had about that. Being in a relationship with somebody, and and it's crazy that it is a self-fulfilling prophecy. This isn't news to anybody, and it's a cliche thing, but it is true, where having low self-worth in these relationships can cause these downward spirals where you're afraid that somebody's going to leave you because they don't see you as they're going to finally see the truth that you're not worth as much as they thought you were, and then they're going to leave you. But then this causes you to behave in these subtle ways, or maybe not so subtle ways, where it pushes them away, and it fulfills itself. So, as dumb as it sounds, you do got to find a place where you can love yourself, at least to some sort of baseline level. Otherwise, people aren't, it's not that, this goes back to there's 1,000 different perceptions of you. So I think for me to deal with this, and I think this is the truth, that people do only see a perception of you. I like to call them slices. I know a slice of Matt, and Matt knows a slice of Brandon. And the slice is, by nature, it's two-dimensional. I'm a three-dimensional person, but you slice me up into a stack of like printer paper, and you take one of those sheets out, and that's the sheet that's for you. And that's how you know
Jeffrey
me.
Dahmer would have loved you.
So, well, but we only know a slice of him. Maybe he's a great guy. You don't know.
You're right. You're right.
That plays into another theory that I have. I mean, not really a theory, right? But it's like that even the most evil people are actually mostly good, except for these really, really evil things that they did that probably occupies an actual minority amount of their time. And the majority of their time is spent doing things that are, even if they're not good, they're at least average, normal human being type things, right? So like, the famous like Hitler was a painter and all these things. Like if you spent a day with Hitler, it might have been just 5% gassing Jews and 95% paintings and poems and hanging out and shooting the breeze, So when you put it into percentages, it's funny that even the worst people in history are actually the majority of their time are normal to good, but it's these really evil things that define you, right? So that's important. And now I lost track of where I actually am, and this is not the conversation I wanted to have, but it's about slices. That's right. So, um, pe- people only know, I have a phone alarm going off. People only know a slice of you. And so in these relationships, even if you're rejected or the person does determine that you have this like weird, like the social low self-worth, or that they don't think you're worth very much, it's still just a judgment of that slice. It's not a judgment of the big stack of paper. And I like to believe we have agency over this paper too. Like the width of it can be infinite. If we want it to be, we can put new paper onto it. We can take old paper off, and because we're always evolving and always changing. So yeah, that's the way I look at that, and that's like the growth mindset I guess I try to get myself into when I'm dealing with those like terrible rejection type situations.
Yeah, it makes total sense. A couple of things. First of all, I just want to say, kind of going to like, I know you veered off into a point about like evil people and stuff, and I get it. This is actually why I don't like the insanity defense when it comes to like murder, because I'm like, well, if you are murdering somebody at that moment in time, nobody's sane at that moment in time, right? Like you're not doing something that's normal. You're not doing something that's sane. So the insanity defense kind of like just just fucks with my head, because it's like, well, yeah, then everybody should have the insanity defense because you were doing something in the heat of the moment and it was not a normal thing. So I just kind of wanted to throw that out there, that it kind of bugs me with that a little bit. But yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, little slices of just delicious delicious pie. That's not what it was. I do like a good pie, though.
Yeah.
But,
what food comes in slices?
well, pie,
You
pizza,
got pie,
cake.
pizza,
Oh,
watermelon,
yeah.
oranges.
I guess, I mean, really
Yeah.
anything can, if you slice it up, it can come in slices, right? I mean, you can slice anything up. You can go out there and slice up your fudgicles if you want, and
Could you? Yeah.
they'll be different ones, you know?
Sure. Yeah. Now, what could you not slice?
It'd be hard to slice pudding. I think that'd be a difficult thing to slice. I mean, you could freeze it first, I guess, maybe.
Oh, yeah, you could slice that.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, so I guess in a way, by changing, it into well, what is it? It's not even really a liquid. I mean, I guess it's I don't even know. It's like a weird in between kind of liquid solid state. But I guess most food is, right? Because the food was constantly solid. Where the hell are we going with this, by the way?
I'm gonna take a strong stance here,
Okay.
and I'm gonna say I think maybe anything can be sliced. And
Any food?
what that anything.
Anything can be sliced.
That's right. Anything can be sliced. And I think the slices themselves can be sliced. You know, I don't know if would you call this a theological or the theory that, I don't know if it's a theory, right? But enough with the preamble. Um, you can cover the half the distance between you and any other point. You've probably heard this before, and I think people have heard this before. And the idea is that you can't ever truly reach anywhere because you always have to cover half that distance. So the distance between you and I, let's just say it's a mile, you cover half that, and it's a half a mile. And in order for me to get to you, I have to cover half that. And there's an infinite amount of halves. Therefore, I have to travel an infinite amount of space or an infinite amount of halves to get to you. And that is a problem. So I just think that's true for slices.
So you think that anything can be sliced and it can be, it's almost like, what are those Chinese or Japanese, those things where they just keep coming out, like those puzzle things where you pull one out and it's just a smaller version of it, and then you pull it out, it's another smaller version, and then it just keeps getting smaller and smaller. So it's kind of like,
The dolls?
yeah, like whatever they're called. I'm not sure exactly what their name is.
Oh boy, I think it's like a Slavic, like a Russian
Yeah,
thing.
maybe that's what it is. I probably got the country of origin wrong.
Yeah, there's dolls. You open a doll, smaller doll
Yeah,
comes out.
yeah,
open
and
a
it's
doll,
just
smaller
like
doll.
that.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say that so you think I'm trying real hard to find something that you couldn't slice.
Go for it. Try it.
Water.
You're not gonna find it.
Or
You can slice it. Freeze it. We already determined you can freeze
so you are
Yeah.
saying that if you change the matter, if you change the state of matter, then you can slice things. Okay, so I have to be weary of that now. All right, gas.
Slice it.
You can slice gas. All right.
Yeah, slice it.
All right. Slice it.
Knife through the
You
air.
can slice the prices
Sliced.
down. Okay, so you could slice gas. I'm gonna let you get
Yeah.
away with that one.
Well, sure. A gas you can, if we're allowed to change forms, if
Right.
we're allowed to change the state of matter. Gas, I mean, name a gas that can't be turned into a solid, or
Hmm.
is there a gas that can't be turned into a solid?
Well, now you're gonna
Boy,
test
this
my
this is easily.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I wasn't good in chemistry. I wasn't good in science really much at all.
This is real easy to fact check too, and I'm just going off the cuff here that every gas can be solidified, but I don't know if that's true.
Right. Yeah. You know what? I'm gonna go ahead and say I'm gonna go ahead and agree to disagree that everything in this world can be sliced. Now, obviously, you can slice an atom, right? You can do things like that.
Yeah.
And that goes by, I mean, that's either atom as in ATOM or atom as in like Adam Levine, or is it Levine? It's Levine, right?
Yeah. I think it's Levine,
Yeah, so if you want to slice up the member of Maroon 5, I wouldn't recommend it because that's illegal, and I don't think he's that bad of a guy. But yeah, I do. I'm just gonna agree to disagree, but also slightly agree, because this is passive aggressiveness works, is to just kind of get you to kind of feel like, oh, he's kind of on my side, but in reality, I don't know for sure.
Oh, I see. You're like an ambush viper, kind of waiting.
I'm
in
a
the
passive
bushes.
aggressive ninja. I'll
Yeah.
tell you that.
Okay. Okay.
Really quick before we continue on, I just want to go ahead and talk about another sponsor that we have, a fake sponsor. This is a new app that's out, Brandon. It's called Procrastination Pro. This app that helps you put off everything more efficiently. Features include delayed notifications, excuse generators, and a do it tomorrow calendar that automatically moves tasks to the next day. You can download this app later. Now listen to the podcast.
That's
All
sweet.
right. So our next, I want to talk about. I mean, I guess we could talk into like, let's talk a little bit about how social media affects anxiety because I think this is huge. I think this is something that was not prevalent 25 years ago, and so people. I mean, there's social media is kind of a different thing, like, and it really does. It can cause a lot of anxiety because we were just talking about how you can get so many positive comments on, like, let's say a picture or a comment you made on Facebook or X or whatever it is, and then all it takes is one negative comment to just push you down. And this actually goes for confidence for me too. Like I've always explained confidence where I could go and I could build my confidence up for years and years or maybe months and months at a time. And then all it takes is one small minute moment to just bring it back to where it was, whether it's like building it up to like go talk to a girl, because the biggest fear of anything is when you're talking to a girl that you want to date or that you like or something is fear of rejection, right? So, and we were talking about earlier about how we even have fear of rejecting other people because we don't want them to have those kind of feelings of rejection because we know what that feels like. So that's kind of the layers upon layers. I mean, do you have some stuff you want to add about social media? Because I do want to say that I think it was around 2014, ever since 2014, which is, I think, where they define Generation Alpha as being born around that time. Mental health amongst teenagers and suicidal thoughts and depression and all that has skyrocketed. And there's obviously a huge correlation between social media and, and that anxiety and mental health issues. But do you have anything you want to add as far as social media just being this huge, awful, because in a sense, it really is awful, but so many people use it and it's such a big moneymaker, and we live in a capitalistic society to where I don't think anything's going to be done about it. But do you have anything to add?
I don't think that I experienced personally that much anxiety around social media, especially in the early days. Like I think we were around in the MySpace days, and that was there anxiety. I wouldn't categorize it as anxiety in the same way that I apply that label to other things. There was definitely a feeling like I wonder if this is, I wonder what I should post. I wonder what I should put up and what people are going to see. Like who's going to be on my friends list. Back then you could choose like a top 8 friends list, which was like very controversial. And so after that, moving on to Facebook and other platforms for social media, I don't think that I experience that much social or just anxiety, right? So that being said, though, I don't know if I put myself out there that much. So I think that maybe there is an aspect of this that's true that I haven't really looked at too closely. I kind of haven't posted a lot of stuff because I'm like, what's the point? It's not going to be that great. People are going to, I'd rather just like kind of divorce myself from the whole thing and not even think about it. And so that might be a bit of like pulling the wool over my eyes so I don't have to deal with it. So that's how I've dealt with it.
No, I get it. And I think that it probably is different for us because we are millennials and we are aware and remember the time before social media. And so I could see where these people that only know social media from when they're a kid to be on and I do wonder how that's going to affect them in their adult life. And I don't know if we're quite there yet with some of them. I mean, some of them we probably are getting close. But yeah, I totally get it. And I also want to say that like in the early days of like MySpace, I think privacy was a big thing. And I don't mean like in a way of like that we're talking about like security or something. What I'm talking about is how on MySpace and Facebook, you're really only talking to the friends that you have, right? And you can make things public and people can go on your page, but they kind of got to look for that. It's not going to show up in their feed or anything. So that I think that might make it a little bit different. I think with like X and maybe even what's the new one that's kind of, because X they kind of say is right leaning now, and they've got the left leaning one. I forgot what it was called. What is it called? Blue Sky. That's what it's called. And things like that, where it's really just you posting things and pretty much anybody can see them. I think that might be a little bit of a different scenario and a different situation. So I think that also depends too. Like, you're going to feel
Yeah.
better about posting something when you know all the people that are going to see it, right? Rather than like there's that fear of the unknown again. It's like, well, okay, I might post on one of these sites and not know who is, going to see it. And that kind of freaks me out a little bit. But that's just what we have to deal with. But yeah, I agree with you for the
Yeah.
most part. I don't really deal with social media that much anymore. As I've gotten older, I've kind of I've realized that to really kind of get away from that, especially because I think nowadays with politics and everything like that on social media, there's a lot of emotional responses, right? It's not really thought out things, or it's just people responding to other people, and usually in a negative way, like because it's something that they don't agree with. And so I think, and I think you're the same as me, is like, I just kind of got away from that. I don't really post on Facebook that much anymore. And if anything nowadays, I think it's going to just be to promote material, if anything, right? To promote this. And I think the
Yeah.
biggest social media thing, if you really want to call it that, I guess it still would be, that we're going to really get involved with besides having our podcast on Spotify is YouTube. And really and like I said, I mean, there are times where you can get negative comments on YouTube. YouTube does a decent job of filtering out the real nasty stuff. So that could come into effect too, because it doesn't take much for you, like I said, for that confidence or whatever level that you have to go from like way up here to way down here. So yeah, I
Yep.
agree with that.
And all you need is 9 good comments can be erased by one bad one. And that one bad one, because that one bad one speaks to that inner voice that you're scared is the actual truth that you've been trying to suppress, and that one comment is just like speaking to that truth
Yeah,
that's
and
inside your
you and I
soul.
have discussed a lot about how negativity trumps positivity on a lot of things in life. And I think it might be interesting, and I'll write it down right now, to maybe do some more research on that and have an episode about that, because it would be interesting to know why our brains are so much more addicted to things like conflict and negative things, and how that affects us in positive. Because even with like viral things, a lot of times, there are positive things that go viral, but I would say overall it's probably more negative than positive. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's really interesting.
I do want to say this obvious, I think it's an obvious point, but we'll find out about social media and about the younger generation. And that because earlier we had talked about what high school was like and anxieties that kind of flare up. Now, if you were to take that experience that I described with those very strong anxiety, events that I had during my high school, junior high experience, and you were to add on social media, which is basically just like it basically extends high school into like the social anxiety part of high school gets extended into the entire fabric of your life 24/7 for these high schoolers and these junior high kids. And that has to be terrifying because now you're living constantly inside this like social anxiety hellscape that you just can't, you can't erase yourself from. Or if you do, then yeah, I don't know. I feel like there's probably a lot of pressure to not erase yourself from that because that's how you become relevant. That's the popularity ladder. It's like what you're just gonna. It's like editing yourself out of the gene pool at that point if you don't want to be a part of that, or that's what it feels like. Yeah, I just want to acknowledge that is probably one of the big producers of anxiety in people in younger generations today, and I do recognize that. And even though I didn't personally feel that, that has to be a terrible and a terrifying experience.
Yeah, and I think that there's a lot of people that things they say online, most of these people aren't going to say them to your face, right? Like they think that they have these big drooping balls with wonderful jiggle physics that are just going to, allow them to say whatever they want, and they think they're a big person and all that. But in reality, if they're face to face, most likely they're not going to say those things. And so it's kind of like a free for all. And and they just think that it's okay to like be that way. And there's going to be, unfortunately, there's just people that like to be mean no matter what and like to be bullies. And it's unfortunate, but it's the world we live in, and you've got to take the good with the bad.
Yeah. Well, now, real quickly before we move on, what do you think is the answer to not to that, but let's bring it home somewhere more personal. So YouTube video, 9 good comments, 1 really bad comment. And it's a comment that hits you personally, whatever they say, right? What do you think is going to be the best way to go about dealing with that?
I'd probably hire a private investigator. Obviously, like, you've got to throw it out. I think the best thing is, first of all, the great thing about YouTube is you can go in there and delete the comments you don't like, right? So that would probably be something I'd probably do at first. I really don't think that's probably the smartest way to deal with it, but at first, that's probably something that I would end up doing. I've had YouTube channels, but I have done that. I will admit that I have done that where you work and it's really just low effort comments. Like if you work something really hard and you put like 8, 10, 12 hours into something into a video and then you post it and they're like, "Oh, this sucks. It's not very good." Or it's like low effort and it's like you don't know what I did. You're just saying stuff because and so I probably deleted those comments. What I would like to do is get to the point where I can just read those and be like, whatever. Some comments are going to be negative, but they're also going to be positive. And what I mean by that is it's going to be like they're actually going to be actually good critiques. They might actually make you think about stuff. Some are just going to be mean and just be done by assholes or whatever. But I also think that I think one of the biggest things I would do is I would probably make sure to only if it's a really just a mean, nasty comment, I probably would delete it. But if it's more like, somebody actually kind of thought about some stuff and they're some stiff, going back to the jiggle physics and the potato.
Yeah, that's fudgical on the
Yeah.
mind there
But
too.
I think that, I would probably just reread a lot of the more positive comments. I think by just directing
Yeah.
myself to that and being like, okay, what do we do good? But like I said, I mean, if it's a comment that's really kind of like a general critique that I think they're legitimately trying not to be mean about, then that's certainly, I would certainly look into that as that way. And they have no reason to be tracked down and murdered viciously by a wild pack of emus.
Of course, yeah. And these people, um, and sometimes even with the negative comments, right? There is something that is constructive you can take from it. So somebody can say like, "I'm like this is the most boring thing I've ever seen," and what you can get from that is that they at some point they got bored, and so that's a metric you can look at, and it's just a slice. We can go back to the slices, but it's that one episode or that one thing they looked at is a slice of what you're capable of, and so you can you can adjust for that. So I think that's
It's and
interesting.
some
And
No,
we'll
I
go
was
on.
just going to say some people are just in a bad mood, right? Like a lot of times it
Yeah.
has nothing to do with your content. They're just being an ass because they don't like themselves. And I think that one of the biggest reasons why I'll get irritated or frustrated in certain situations and I have to talk myself down is because of how I feel about myself. And so, but I certainly don't go on. I hardly ever leave comments on YouTube channels anyways, but if I do like something, I will leave it. If I don't like something, I will just move on. I won't leave a comment at all.
Yeah.
But I do generally think that there are just some people out there who are just kind of like, fuck the world. And so let's watch this fucker burn. Let's watch the whole thing burn. And it really has nothing to do with your content. It's just them being them.
Trolls.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
trolls. And I've heard that, and people that are famous that get to a certain point, like I don't know, the podcaster Joe Rogans of the world or whatever. I've heard them say that you just don't read comments at all. Like you just get to a certain point, you just can't read comments because then your emotions are a roller coaster with the ups and downs. And they'd probably start looking at metrics at that point of just like, are views going up or are views going down? And then you just respond to that because there are people that legitimately, they just don't care. It's like, even if half the people are out there, not like, like the Logan Pauls of the world that have made a huge living off of these, rage baiting, hate baiting kind of comments and in the end, does it really matter that somebody's in their room stewing over Logan Paul but he's out there, he had businesses, opportunities, Prime energy drink, and and he's got his podcast and all in the wrestling, and I'm sure he's got plenty of things that people actually enjoy at this point. And yeah, so it's interesting. It's like not only can it be something to ignore, but for some people it can be fuel, or it can be the desired effect because it's another view.
Yeah, and I agree. And I do think that like to get to that point though, to where you're probably not going to read comments, you're probably going to be big at that point, right? Like we're to the point where you're probably going to get too many comments anyways, and you just don't want it. And like,
Yeah, I
do you
think
think
like
Mr.
5.
Beast,
I might be too big
right? I
for
mean, do you think
after like
Mr.
5
Beast is
comments.
reading like everybody's comments like all the time? Even to the point where if you get big enough, and I'm definitely not saying that that's going to happen with us, but if that happens to someone, then you start hiring out, right? Like, okay, well, now you're taking care of my social media channel or whatever. You're not even touching those things mostly. All you're doing is focusing out. If you're a podcaster, you're focusing on that, or if you're just YouTube content creator, you're focused on whatever your content is. So I think that it gets to
Yeah,
that point too. And it'd be great. Yeah,
moderators.
it'd be
Yeah,
great to get to that point. But, I mean, not everybody's going to do that. And so I do think the smaller you are with what you're doing, and yeah, probably the more you're going to read the comments, the more they're going to bother you because you're not at that
yeah,
level. I could see at the point where you get to a big level like Joe Rogan or something, it's like, well, fuck the comments. Who cares at that point? Why do they even matter? Because if you're getting what I forgot how much you got, like $50 million from Spotify or whatever it was,
100
100
million. I
million from
think. Yeah.
Spotify. So,
Yeah.
you're like, the comments are going to be the least of it. So,
That's a great point. Yeah, I mean, if you're out in the ocean with a dinghy and a 5-foot wave hits you, it has a much different effect in the direction you're traveling and
well, if I'm out in the ocean, I
your
better have
ability.
my dinghy. I'll tell you that. Because then I can
But if you're
rage
out
bait
there,
all night, baby. All right, sorry.
okay, sure, yeah. It's rage. That's a way to do it, but I haven't heard of. But yeah, if
You
you're
got to
out
show
there
the
with a
sharks what's
huge,
up, man.
okay, right, yeah. Well, once there's blood in the water, things get,
That's true.
you know,
Good thing I don't have
yeah,
I don't have a hernia or anything, so I don't think that'll be a problem. But also, they might like
right,
other things that come out of the rage baiting, so who knows?
yeah. I have to get the rest of this analogy out, or it's just gonna bug me. If you Boy, what am I saying? If you're out in the ocean in a giant cargo ship and a 5-foot wave hits you, it doesn't do anything. There, done. Okay,
Okay, I
move
got
on.
you. I got you.
All
No,
right.
I get it. I
Okay.
get it. Yeah, and that's
Yeah,
a
yeah.
perfect analogy. And I apologize
There it is.
because I started going off on, being lost on a raft, masturbating apparently, which I feel like would be the last thing on my mind if I was lost in the ocean on a raft. Maybe like 5 days in, and I'd be like, oh, nobody's coming for me, so I might as well come for them. Okay. Anyways, sorry. Yeah,
Okay.
I got bad there. All right, so let's just kind of wrap this up here with the anxiety. I think this has been a really insightful episode. I like all the things that we've talked about, and hopefully we can help people along the way that are listening and stuff like that. I want to talk about how it's really important to have a support system, even though it's hard to build one because, like I had said before, you think you're a burden, you don't think people understand. There's all these things going on through your head. So it's really hard to build a support system. I recently just started doing therapy. And I've obviously been on antidepressants for a long time. Never taken anything that was for anxiety, though. So I've never taken what's some of the big ones, like a Xanax. Is that for? Yeah, I've never taken any of that kind of stuff, mainly because I have anxiety about how those are going to make me feel. So it's just so weird. But yeah, I think it's great to have a support system, any support system you can get. I think it's safe to say that Brandon and we understand each other. We know a lot about this, about what we experience with anxiety. So I would certainly say that me and you are part of our own support system in our own way. But you can have multiple support systems. You can have other people around you. Family is usually a big support system. Sometimes people don't have that, or sometimes the family doesn't understand. Although with anxiety and depression, usually if a family member has it, most of the family members are going to have it because it does kind of trickle down in that way. It's not like the trickle down economics, which did not work, people, but it's much like the trickle down effect of just having anxiety and mental health and that being in the DNA. But treatment and therapy, there was a long time where I said therapy, it's not for me, or they're not going to help. I've only done a couple of sessions. I have another session actually in a couple of days, but I think me allowing myself to accept that I should do it. And I think everybody, if you can do it, you should try to do it. I also know that it is difficult to find the help. It took me a while to find a therapist. There are these loopholes that you have to go through, whether you're on whatever insurance you're on, or whether you're on Medicaid, or if you're older and you're on Medicare, or whatever it is. There are things in this society and our government, and it's sad to say they don't make it easy, and it's unfortunate, but you do kind of got to push through. But I just want to make sure that people understand it's great to have a support system. Get yourself one, even if it's just pets or you're talking to your blow up doll. I don't care what it is. Just whatever makes you feel better about the situation is going to be good for you. And that's kind of what I wanted to say. Brandon, what do you got?
What do I got about anxiety? Yeah, I want to focus on the little things that I know that have helped me. First off, I think that everything you said is really great. I had my own personal, I think, therapy journey. I was in a situation where I reached out to, everybody's heard of BetterHelp. So I found a therapist through BetterHelp because
Ooh,
I didn't know what
maybe
else to
we'll
do at
have
the
a real
time.
sponsor in no time.
Yeah. I talked with somebody there for, I forgot what the period was, maybe 3 or 4 months, but I got a lot of value out of that. And I don't think that is a testament as much to BetterHelp as it is just to having a therapist and talking to somebody about the things that's bothering you most. So I do think that's really important. And then to touch on other things like the social anxiety, you're going into situations. I just really vouch for trying to think about other people more than you think about yourself. I find that to be helpful. And then I also find that my phone alarm's going off. I also find, and these aren't alarms for you. These are alarms for like other anxiety things that, so it's
Your
just an
anxiety's
example.
taking over right now.
Yeah, yeah,
I
exactly.
had no thought whatsoever that that alarm was for
Yeah,
anything to do with the podcast or me,
yeah.
but you had to tell me anyways.
The next episode should be confidence, and
Right.
that'll be
That
the
could
one we
be it.
talk about
We'll
that.
we'll write that down. That's definitely going to
Yeah.
be something, even though we did discuss some of it, but that all comes into play. But
Yeah. But I
yeah,
agree. Yeah, you find people to talk to, and I think that everybody is experiencing this to some level. And when I say everybody, I mean basically everybody. I'm sure there's those psychopaths out there. But a lot of people are experiencing anxiety. I think if you talk to somebody about it, you'd be surprised what kind of connections you can make with them and how similar everybody's experiences are. This is kind of the hope for this episode, I think, is that we'll talk about it and probably anybody listening just identifies with 95% of it.
yeah, hopefully get over the fear of being a burden. And it's tough. And I can say from personal experience, and I'm sure you can say it too, that it's really hard to do that because you don't want to feel like a burden. But But I think therapy can help. There's some people that just do therapy all the time, and that helps. There's some people that do antidepressants or anti-anxiety meds, and that helps. There's some people that do both, and that helps. So really, you just got to find your magic spot and your sweet spot, and let it do. Just let yourself be, and realize that you're worth much more than your brain's probably telling you, and that people like you, and that you know just talk about it with people, and I think there's a lot more people out there that will understand than we all think there is, and because it is very common. Also, I just want to say that if you really really need to fart, you should probably go outside and do it sometimes, because yesterday I had a fart follow me around for so long I had to file a restraining order, and luckily everything's good now. The fart does not come within 10 feet of me. And if it does, I call the fart police, and they are here just like that. I want to do a big shout out to the fart police. They're great.
And not to be confused with UPS, because they're probably in brown uniforms, I'd
That's true.
imagine.
UPS is in brown uniform. I did see a UPS truck go over a hill really fast one time, and man, that thing had ups. Anyways, we are moving on. This is the end of our second episode. I want to thank everybody for listening or watching, or however you're getting this information, whether you're getting it in small clips on YouTube or you're listening to the whole thing. We thank you. We love you. You are loved. You are liked. And just remember that it is possible to do a lot of things if you just let go of some of those worries and some of that anxiety. Brandon, anything else to add?
Nope, that's it.
All right. Well, for the Socially Awkwards podcast, episode 2, I am Matticus Finch, and I do not know how to kill a mockingbird. And this, my friend, is
Brandon J. Mikowski.